Welcome back to another episode of Keoni Chats. And so I am happy to announce that this episode with Tasha Emmerson is going to be the reintroduction into releasing full episodes on YouTube. And so there's a lot of factors that went into taking that break from releasing full episodes on YouTube that aren't really applicable now to where the show is, also just technology-wise, where the show is. And it was fun to just, invest all of my attention and efforts into making the audio platform or the audio the best that it can be. But it was really just the fact that I had a reliable second camera that I can really have the same level of dependency on both cameras, both angles. It was about time for me to jump back into this. And so if this is your first time checking out the show, I welcome you. So all episodes can be found on all podcast platforms, and again, now back on YouTube. And if you would like to be in the loop for when episodes are released, you can follow the show on social media by looking up at KCmedia13 on Instagram and Twitter, and then at KonluKMedia on Facebook. I do other creative activities other than podcasting, and so all of that work can be found on my website. That's going to be KeoniConlu.com. KeoniConlu.com. And so got the podcast, and we are about to wrap up 2023 as I'm recording this. So be on the lookout for the latest entry in the DC animated review series. And so this past year, if I was to give a quick little rundown on it, it was not, the film quality wasn't to what it was about 5 years ago or so. And that's kind of understandable because they restarted a new universe. They also are just trying to flourish it as much as they can. So it's not going to be the same amount of impact as the other universe, but that's okay. And then also, December is when this episode will be released. That's also going to be close to the end for the NFL regular season and back to ramping up for the NFL mock drafts. And so both of those blog series are available on the website. I do take photos, and not as often, but there are times where I do take photos and I put it on the website for anyone that's interested in looking to see. So I have had a little bit of a break from the Keoni Chats podcast show just because I just needed to change it up a little bit in terms of keeping things fresh. And I came to the realization that there is another podcast show that I run that I was running with my brother, Jack Conlu, that was on the shelf, and it was called Tres C, Conlu's Con Conversations. So around the middle of summer, decided to dust it off and turn it into KCM Sports. And the first blog series that I did with that show was the first series I did with that show was to go over all 32 NFL teams and offense, defense, special teams, and then predicting the final record of the 2023 season, and then also towards the later half of the series, what I think they'll do with the off season. So that is available. So you'll just have to look up KCM Sports on podcast platforms. I've said this on those intros for that series, but if there is a show that if there's a platform that you use for your podcast, you let me know if I'm not on there, and I'll make sure to get myself on there, because I want to make sure that whichever one best fits your needs, I want to make sure that my show is there. Is that people pleasing? Yes, it is. So this episode, which I mentioned at the top of this intro, is with Tasha Emmerson. And so Tasha I've known of her for a little bit, but this actually serves as our first conversation together. We've had some similar social circles, some similar friends. And an example is former guest David Rodriguez and Ashby Rodriguez. And I I hear glowing things from them, but just to have her sit across this room from me and tell her story or a portion of her story, that it all just checked all the boxes. So, fun fact also is that David and Ashby, they are godparents to Tasha's kids. And so we talked about that process on how to even make that selection. And I don't have kids, so, whatever she was, whatever advice, which I'm not going to tell you because I want you to listen to the episode or watch the episode, it stuck with me. So she's a very wise person, and it was nice to just, before diving into her career as a virtual teacher, just hearing how she made it through life with not a very strong family support system, and then also knowing her husband for close to 20 years. It was a lot of fun. And then when we dived into her teaching career, it definitely, you got the feeling that she carried the thoughts of her kids throughout her teaching career. And then when COVID hit, what was the best decision for her, which was to stay virtual. That way she could be there for her kids. So she's also the founder of Confessions of a Tiny Teacher. That's where she has created a curriculum for those, homeschooled students that the parents can purchase and use. And so all that fun, just her website, there you go, will be available in the description below for you to take a look at. Also, you'll be able to make purchases on that website if this fits your family dynamic. And so, there was really, with this, again, being our first time talking with each other, it was not just her knowledge, but just her comfortability, her openness really made this conversation very fluid and very easy and very comfortable. So I thank you, Tasha, for coming on and sharing your story. And I thank you for just being so comfortable and open. So however you are in taking this episode on whichever platform you prefer, or if you are watching on YouTube, I hope you enjoy my chat with Tasha Emmerson. So this is interesting because our paths have kind of crossed, but this is actually our first time ever, two more times ever.
Yeah.
I really talked to each other.
Yeah.
So, I guess kind of to take it to the very beginning, you and your husband, Tristan, are friends, I believe, first off, but then kind of branched off, but friends with former guest David Rodriguez and David's wife, Ashby, formerly Conwell, now Rodriguez.
Yes.
So, when you met David back in high school, let's have some fun, silly stories about him. What was your first impression of him, if you remember?
He just knew everyone. That was really, that's just David in a nutshell, right? Everywhere, you can't take him anywhere because he will find somebody that he knows anywhere you go. Even out of state, we went to Vegas for we did a joint bachelorette party sort of situation over a decade ago. And we went to Vegas, a different state, and he found multiple people he knew there. And we're like, how are you doing this? Everyone just knows David. Yeah. And so that's kind of my go-to story for him. But I've known him forever. He actually dated my sister for a while. Oh. David and Ashby are the godparents of our children. So, we've just been friends forever.
Now, I know that, I grew up, so my brother is same age as David, and then you and Tristan have, crossed paths with him as well. But I just remember growing up, David, I always saw him as my friend, like a brother. So my brother. Yeah. So not really like a brother to me, or biological. But and then now, as we are speaking, they're doing this grand adventure of traveling to different areas for a month, for 12 months. Yeah. Now, when you heard that, you gave it, just from what I found out or what I was able to look up about you, you do seem like the adventuring type. At least from some of my impressions of some of your posts and whatnot. Obviously, first time talking, but when you heard that, any sense of God, I wish I was me. I wish I could do
100%. We go on adventures, but we do local adventures.
Yeah.
And I'm sure we'll talk about this more throughout this, but my oldest has some eccentricities.
Sure.
And traveling with him is really tough. So Tristan and I have never actually even left the country. We've been to very few states. Like, we don't really get to travel as much as we like. So there is a lot of, like, we are living vicariously through you guys. Like, they're sending us, like, updates that we update the kids with because, you know, the boys obviously miss them. And
Sure, yeah.
So yeah, we've just been kind of following their adventures and trying to live through them and pretending it's us.
Okay, so obviously I don't have kids. I have a fur kid, you know, but we talked about that. I want to follow up on, but when it came to picking grandparents or godparents, what is that process like?
You know, for us, it doesn't come from a religious place.
Okay.
We have never been religious, you know, even prior to meeting each other. We've never been religious, but neither of us have family support, and we don't have people in our lives that are really there for our children or for us. And so for us, it came down to, like, you know, God forbid, if something were to happen to us, like, who would we want to raise our kids? It's certainly not my family, and it's certainly not his family. So who do we turn to, right? We don't want our kids ending up in, like, foster care in the state or, you know, any of that. And so we were looking for somebody who had similar beliefs to us, who we've known for a long time. We trust their character and their judgment. And I mean, David was, like, the first person that came to mind. Yeah. And he and Ashby were together at the time, but it hadn't been very long, so we didn't really know her very well. Yeah. At that point, but, like, obviously over time, like, it's like, yeah, this is perfect. Like, love her, trust her with my kids. Like, she's wonderful, and, like, I couldn't think of better godparents for them. So
were there, obviously you don't have to name names, but in terms of, were there any runner-ups, or, like, was there any, like, oh, like, I don't want to think like a tiebreaker, like, oh, you know, these two people are, like, two sets of people are, you know, they're almost there, but I'm thinking of, like, a race.
I mean, we have other friends that, you know, are in relationships that we are like, you know, we love these people dearly, but, like, for us, it was a very clear decision. It was just like everything about, you know, David and what we've known over the years. I've obviously known him longer. Like, he just really embodies kind of our, like I said, our beliefs. And that's what really matters, is, like, we don't want our kids to go to somebody who has different religious beliefs or different, you know, like, be a decent fucking human being beliefs, you know? And so that to us was, like, the big, like, David was the clear choice. Yeah. So, and obviously, you know, Ashby is wonderful too. But at the time, like I said, they hadn't been together long enough. Sure. And so we were like, we don't really know Ashby, but, like, we trust David's judgment. So, but that's how.
When they got married, I was the person I was with at the time, and I was in college. I was about to graduate. This person was, like, kind of sophomore-y, so a little, it's younger. Also, at that time in my life, I was just like, I was dating people I worked with because I was like, oh, you know, it's easier.
Convenience. Yeah, totally.
But then I remember talking to my mom, and I said, I want to bring her to David's wedding because, you know, obviously I want, you know, include the people I'm in a relationship with at these events. And then I just remember my mom saying, like, oh, well, she didn't, like, explicitly say this, but I was like, I could tell. Yeah. I was one of those, like, is there really a future? Or is it more like, I guess, a kind of a linear thought is, have you ever watched How I Met Your Mother?
Oh, hell yes. Religiously. I can quote the whole damn thing for you. Yeah.
I think there was one scene where they're talking about, like, including people in lifelong photos.
Yes. Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
So it was.
She's going to be commemorated in that event now forever.
Yeah. Yeah. So, that was one of those, like, if I could, you know, see what I see now, it's like, maybe not have, you know, included her in that special moment. But David was so kind, and you know, I hope as he's hearing this first part, he and Ashby are blushing, nice and well. So, anywho, this is about you, not about them for now. When you met Tristan, so you said, remind me that you two have been dating for before you got married. You're dating for, like, what is it?
17 years this December, yeah.
How do you stay with someone for that long?
Oh, man, I don't know. I don't know how he's not sick of my shit yet. I don't know. I feel like, I mean, in a lot of ways, I feel like we just kind of got lucky, you know, and that we've grown together. Because, you know, when we met, we were freshmen in college. We were 18 years old. Like, you know, we were not even really adults yet.
Yeah.
But we had so much in common. I think that's what, like, drew us together in the first place. Is, like, our first date, we had that, like, deep, meaningful conversation that I feel like has to happen in relationships, right? Where we, like, got into, like, the nitty-gritty of, like, your childhood and stuff like that. And we just had so much in common. And so I think that from the beginning really kind of bonded us. And then we've always just kind of been on the same page, and we're both very, like, supportive of the other person. You know, we've definitely gone through challenges. Like, don't get me wrong, it has not always been easy. Trying to just decide how much to disclose because it's not all my story, you know.
Fair enough, but so let's kind of break it down. So I'm in the relationship I'm in now. My partner, you know, we're about to head into 3 years, and the talk of marriage has been there from the very beginning. But now it's kind of becoming a little more serious.
Sure.
Things are moving also a little faster than what it was in the beginning of the relationship. When it came to, because I always think, like, I guess when you turn older, like, okay, I hit 21. What's next? 25 because I can rent a car. So I kind of figure like the sequences of 5 years is like a good landmark to work with. At the 5-year mark with you and Tristan, was there any kind of like questions or just like, you know, I've spent 5 years with this guy. I don't, maybe something that's like, you know, how do you kind of handle those like self-evaluation moments of the relationship, looking at just that first 5 years?
Yeah, well, so we didn't even get engaged until like 6 or 7 years. Like we did not, we didn't even go, like we talked about it. Like you said, like those conversations were there from the beginning. It was very clear that we wanted to get married and have kids eventually, maybe not with this person, but like those conversations about what you want out of life were there. But we kind of saw it as like there was no rush, right? Like if we're going to be together, we're going to be together. It doesn't matter if we get married now or in 25 years. Like we're just going to be together and that's what it's going to be. But I don't feel like I really had any like doubts. Like I mean, even now, you know, 17 years in, I don't really have doubts. I mean, there are things that like are struggles for us and things that are like, you know, trigger points for us that like we fight about and stuff like that. But I've never questioned if he was the person that I wanted to be with. Okay. Which may or may not be the answer that you wanted to hear.
No, that's good.
But yeah, there was never any question about that, despite all like, you know, 17 years is a lot of ups and downs and we've been through some shit. And but I've never questioned that he was the person that I wanted to be with. So yeah.
Because I've been through a lot of relationships where I also see my brother who has been able to hold on to relationships for a year plus. And so when I think I saw him handling his first relationship, I was still in that phase of, okay, we're going to at least make it month by month. Oh, we made it 3 months? Look at that.
We did it.
We did it. And so it wasn't until like, you know, the relationship I told you about that you know, she came with me to David's wedding and this one where it's like, okay, we're branching on past at least a year. Yeah. This feels different. So yeah, I have no doubts either about my partner, but it's one of those like, whoa, we're making it.
Yeah. It's weird when you look back and you're like, wow, we've gone through some stuff. We've been together for a while, and it just kind of like flies by, right? And you're just like, hey, interesting. Like,
When it comes to, because I'm also one of those like I've yelled, I've fought, but now with this relationship, I'm just like, you know what? I'd rather just talk than fight. How do you handle confrontations, at least with Tristan?
We're both very good at communicating. I think the hardest thing for us is I'm like, I want to talk about it right now. And he's like, I'm going to need a minute. And so that can be really hard to reconcile because it's like, I get that he needs that think time, but I'm like, I don't want this to linger because I mean, you know, you're in a relationship. When you have a fight, your whole day is kind of off, right? You just feel it. And there's this like heaviness. And I'm like, I don't want this feeling anymore. So we're going to get this out in the open right now. And so that can be a little hard sometimes because he's like, no, I don't want to talk right now. Don't force me to talk right now. And I'm like, well, you can't force me to just sit here and like stew in it either. And so trying to find that like healthy middle ground where it's like, you know, we take some time. And for us, it's been, you know, obviously years of practice, but he'll say like, I need a little bit of time. Let's talk tonight. And if I have like an end point of like, we're going to talk at this point, then that helps me. Instead of just like, we're just not going to talk until I want to. And then it's like up in the air forever. Giving me that like end point of like, okay, we can talk after the kids go to bed or whatever, I'm like, okay, I know there's a point coming where we're going to talk and it's not just going to like linger there forever. So we found a way to like compromise so that we both kind of get what we want. And I feel like that is really important. But that took many a fight and many years to, you know, get that piece down.
So then at first, was it just like argument, and then, or is it kind of like, what was it like when you two first had your first confrontation, and then how has it evolved into what you just said now? I
mean, the interesting thing with Tristan and I is we don't really fight that often. Like, it makes it sound like we fight all the time, but we really don't. Like,
I don't either, and I'm like, it just sounds so exhausting.
It's just right, yeah. But you know, like I said, we do have like every couple has their like trigger points of like hot topics in their relationship, right? And like we have those just like everyone else, and they come up. But like I think the evolution is more just like we've gotten to know each other and what the other person needs, and being willing to make those compromises and those sacrifices for your partner, so that we're both able to get what we need and able to work through that confrontation together. Yeah. And again, it's just communicating, like being able to communicate and be like, I can't just sit there and wait for you to be ready to talk. Like, that doesn't work for me. I can't do that. Yeah. And, you know, him being like, I can't have you force me into a conversation because then I might say things that don't necessarily mean, or I'm not ready to talk about, you know. Yeah. So, you know, it all comes back to that, like being able to communicate what you need from your partner. Yeah. I didn't like previously. So I'm in therapy, but previously, anytime a confrontation would happen, I would just shut down. Yeah. I would just be like, I don't know what I like. Either the anger is kind of brewing up and I don't know how to handle it, or it's just like, I'm going to say something stupid. I'm just going to keep it all down. Yeah. So when it came to your wedding night, or just like the whole preparation for a marriage. Sure. Was how involved were you? How involved was Tristan? And I don't know, did you have a planner too? No, it was just me. Oh. And I am so not a girly girl, so that was like not a thing for me. I remember this whole situation with his stepmom at the time. His dad and her are no longer like together, so she's not really a part of our lives, but like she was like so insistent that we needed flowers, and I was like, I don't need flowers. Like, what do I need flowers for? They're just gonna die, and they're really expensive. Like, flowers are ridiculously expensive. Let's just talk about that for a second. And I'm like, I don't need this. Like, I don't care. What am I gonna do with all these flowers afterwards? Like, it just seemed like a waste of money to me, and like a little too girly. So I was like, I don't need them. And she was like, you have to have flowers at your wedding. I was like, I am not paying for flowers. And so she bought some flowers so that I could have a bouquet, which I didn't even care about. I didn't even want a bouquet. My bridesmaids didn't have bouquets. Like, that was not a thing we were doing. And so I was very much like, I don't care kind of bride. It's just like, I don't know. Like, for a long time, we debated if we even wanted to have a wedding. Okay. For a couple years. And I think that's also part of why it took us so long to actually get married, because we were busy going through college and grad school and, you know, all that. But I was just like, you know, I do really want to have that moment with all of our friends and, you know, our loved ones to kind of like celebrate together. But I didn't want it to be this big fancy to do. Right. So, I was very like chill. There was no drama. There was nothing. Tristan had like a couple opinions on things. Like, I always asked him, because like I said, it was just us doing our thing. Yeah. And he had some opinions on things, and we just made it very casual. I mean, like, there was nothing fancy or stressful or anything. So there's a movie there was a movie that kind of popped in my head. I love movies, and more than just the superhero ones you see around this room. It's called like The 5-Year Engagement with like Jason Segel and like Emily Blunt. Basically, they have like they are on this trajectory of marriage, and then they have this like they split for a little bit, but then they come back together. And I'm gonna spoil it for everyone, but the movie's been out for years. Yeah. So like when they come back together, I think it's fine to spoil it at this point. Yeah. Okay, good. So when they come back together, they do like this very rushed version of a wedding, because they're like, you guys been engaged for this long, let's just get you guys to the end. Get it done. Sure. So it's a very cute montage at the end. You know, they're like, oh, different stages of their life. They're literally sprinting through a park as they're kind of going through each of it. So if you haven't seen it, I'm looking at you, fans. You better watch it. But was there any sense of like, God, let's just get to the finish line. Let's just get to this next part of our lives together. Or again, were you just keeping in mind of like, we'll get there when it gets there? I didn't really have any of that, because it was like, I mean, at that point we had already been together for like 7 years. We already lived together. We had shared bank accounts. Like, we were already doing the damn thing. Like, the adulting. Yeah, like it wasn't really It was like, really, it was just like, let's have a party and sign a piece of paper.
Nice.
like for us, that's what it was. There was no rush to get there because I was like, we're already kind of there. Like nothing in our lives changed after we got married because we were already living it. Like, so for us, we didn't really have that kind of like rush to just like get it over with. And I think that's why it took us like 7 years to do, because there really was no rush. But I mean, I'm glad we did it. You know, like I said, like that was a really special moment with our friends and family and stuff. But yeah, I didn't really feel a sense of like, get her done. So, yeah.
So something you mentioned a little bit earlier, a little bit ago, and then also in our talks leading up to here is, you know, you didn't have the strongest family support system when it came to the marriage. Let's use that as an example. Other than the former stepmom, was there anyone else that was kind of like trying to nudge you one direction or just kind of like saying, hey, you should do this? Because I come from an Asian family. We're very strongly opinionated. So
yeah, my family, like neither of our families really were, except for like the stepmom. We had a little bit of drama. Like that was the only wedding drama was like around her. That she wanted to invite like 20 of her closest friends that we'd never met. And I'm like, we're inviting like 30 people total. Like you can't have more than half of the people that we have. And it's like strangers that we don't know.
Sure. Yeah.
And so like the only drama was really around that.
Okay.
Yeah, we didn't really have people forcing anything. Like my mom didn't even go to like my bridal shower or anything like that. Like, so she wasn't really like involved. She didn't try and like have her opinions. Like no one else was really involved in anything.
Yeah.
So made it really easy.
Oh,
yeah.
When we, I think a little bit ago, we talked about like the wedding parties because our first summer together, we went to like 4 weddings. And we were like, good God, I never want to do this again. But, it gave her also a good idea of like wedding parties. And so she would say, hey, I want to have something small. And I'm like, and then she would follow up like a few seconds later. But I know you like a party. I know you like to be a center of attention. She's a little more introvert. I'm extrovert. Sure. And so I was like, well, thank you for your consideration.
Yes, I appreciate that thoughtfulness.
I appreciate that.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And then in terms of, okay, so kind of going back to the family support, was that during your childhood where you kind of saw it kind of on the decline, or was it kind of when you became an adult that they also started stepping away?
It was always. My parents have never. So it's my mom and my stepdad. I never really knew my biological dad.
Okay.
So it's my mom and my stepdad, and they got married when I was 6. So he was pretty much the father figure in my life as I was growing up. But they were just never what I really expected parents to be. So I have 3 sisters. One of my sisters is really close in age to me, and then there's like a 12-year age gap. And so my younger sisters are 21 and 23. And so once they were born, my parents really checked out. And so like I was left to be the parental figure. I was the one who handled after school snacks and like that kind of stuff. I did all the cleaning. My mom was pretty checked out. My dad did work, but I was left to do a lot of the parenting things. So I didn't really get that childhood experience. I was kind of thrust into motherhood pretty early. But even as like a grown up and like, aging out of the house, they were not supportive of anything. They have very, very opposing beliefs to me just in general. Like, I don't even know how I came from this family because we're just so wildly opposite.
Yeah.
They do not believe in education or schooling. They wouldn't co-sign on student loans. Had to rack up a ton of debt to even be able to go to school. I'm the first person in my family to graduate high school, let alone college, let alone have any sort of career. So like,
congratulations.
Thank you. It was a hard path though, because they literally blocked me at every step. They never supported, my relationship with Tristan. They say they do, but they don't.
You can see it in the eyes.
You can see it in the eyes, and they blame him for everything. Anything that happens that we disagree on, or if I say, like, I don't agree with that, they're like, it's just Tristan. He's the puppet master. And I'm like, yes, because I have no brain of my own. Thank you so much. Like, they just blame him for everything. And so it's like their actions and their words don't really match up, Yeah. Meanwhile, my sister, who's 33, I think she's 33. Every guy she's dated has been amazing and perfect. And like her husbands are like, husbands, she's had one husband, but her partners have, she had one that was abusive. She ended up in the hospital several times. People have cheated on her, drug use. And I'm like, yeah, that's the winner, but not, my husband of 17 years who's never done any of those things. Like, you know, so for me, it's always been like, if my parents disagree, I'm probably on the right path. It's kind of like a marker for like, I guess I'm doing it right. But that's just kind of always been how they were, even with my siblings. Like my youngest sibling, who's 21 now, she got kicked out of the house when she was 14 because she was super depressed and had a suicidal attempt. And instead of dealing with it, my parents blamed her for bankrupting the family, which they didn't even go bankrupt, and kicked her out of the house. And what happened was it's like the most ridiculous story. My husband and I were at the hospital with, you know, my oldest. Yeah, oldest. He was a couple months old. And my husband... He used to run a sticker business. I don't know if you remember that.
Vaguely.
He got an X-Acto knife stuck in his knee.
Oh, yes. Oh my God.
So I don't know how it happened. So we were at the hospital when this all went down with my sister, and my parents literally dropped her off in the emergency room with us, and we're like, she's yours now. We're like, so we're in the emergency room with my husband with a, you know, knife in his knee. I have a newborn baby, and now my 14-year-old, you know, sister who's super depressed and suicidal just got dropped off in the emergency room with me, and I'm like... Cool. So we're doing this now. This is what we're doing. So we ended up taking her in, and she lived with us until she was 18 and moved out. So we like raised her through like her high school years, and then she moved out. But that's just how my parents are. They're not really parents. They're fun to be around, but they're not, you can't really rely on them for any sort of support, emotional, you know, financially, any support of any kind. So
if I was in your situation and I'm the youngest, so like let's say my brother is the youngest. Yeah. So it's like I would be fine like helping serve food, but then also look outside, see kids playing, and I could feel like maybe a resentment start to build up.
I don't know. I mean, there's not things that I'm like, man, I wish I got to do that. Like I never really went through like a party phase, but I don't have regrets about that. You know, I'm not like, man, I wish I had got to party in my 20s. Like it wasn't really a thing that I ever had regrets about. I'm kind of an old soul, and I'm not a big, you know, drinker, anything like that. Never have been. And now with like all my chronic health issues, like that's a no-go for sure. But yeah, I never really had regrets like that. The resentment is more just like, I wish they had been parents. Yeah. Like it's really unfair that they had 4 children and they chose to parent none of them. Like I don't understand, and that ties into like our infertility issues too, where I'm like, I don't understand how people who don't want to be parents have children, and people who really want to be parents and would be great ones can't. And so that, I think, is where the resentment comes from, as opposed to like, oh, I missed out on all these fun experiences. I mean, there are moments I can point to, like there was like a choir trip, you know, in high school that my parents were like, absolutely not. And I was like, well, what if I fundraise all the money? And then they're like, fine. So I did it, and then they went behind my back and told the teacher I couldn't go and got all the money back, and I didn't get to go even after I did everything because they needed me home to help with the kids. So then, you know, there's like little things like that, but they're big picture. There's not like, oh, I wish I had gotten to play more or, you know, go and do these things.
If anything, it kind of sets you up to want to give that to your kids. Like, okay,
100%.
Make sure that you have time to go play.
Yes, not putting my troubles on my children because it's not their job. They didn't ask for this family, right? Like, it's not their job to deal with my emotions or my shortcomings or any of those things. So
that's when they turn 21.
Yeah. Then I can throw it on them. No, you can throw it on them. That's right. Payback.
So growing up, it wasn't until like, you know, I would say like teens or so where, you know, the family household started to get a little bit divided because, you know, my mom was in a stable job for, at that point, 20 plus years. And my dad was still kind of hopscotching around jobs here or there. And then he, you know, started partying. He started going next door to people that are probably, you know, 28, 25-ish and, you know, drinking with them and coming home or going golfing and being gone for a while. So, you know, I definitely had those moments where I would see my friends' dads and how interactive, or if I'm watching shows now. My dad's passed away last year, so it's kind of like one of those, it can be a little bit of a touchy subject to see like, you know, so much father and son interactions. And, you know, there are times too where I do have those I wish moments like, hey, you know what? I wish maybe, you know, my dad would not. I think it was more like I wish he would just show a little more interest, because he did start showing more interest when I was doing my podcast.
Yeah.
And I kind of took that as like, oh, you're just trying to oversee me, because he was like, you should do a podcast series about all the people that went to Sunset High School. And I was like, no.
Pass.
So when you're watching TV, watching movies, you know, we would talk about you watching Friends.
Sure.
Again, I haven't seen all of Friends, but I'm sure there's some parental moments. Are there any like triggering moments when you're like, that's some bitch?
Yeah, those things get me all the time, because even Tristan's family, so the most involved parent or grandparent we have is Tristan's mom, and she lives in Oklahoma, so she's not even close. Yeah. And she has a lot of physical and mental health issues, and like she's the most stable, involved person in our lives, which you would not expect. And so, yeah, I get triggered watching shows all the time. I get triggered when my friends are posting family holidays. Like, we don't have families to spend holidays with. It's our little family of 4. And then my sister, who, you know, lived with us for 4 years, she still comes over for the holidays. But, like, those things, yeah, they're really triggering. I went to a park, and I might cry on you, so just, like, be prepared.
Totally fine. There's tissues right over there. It's a little bit out of range, though.
That's all right. Just fair warning, because this one
totally
gets
fine.
me so much. But, like, we were at a park once, and there was this grandpa there playing with his 2 granddaughters. And I was like, that would never happen for my kids. And, like, my kids have asked, like, why doesn't our grandma come play with us? Why doesn't my grandpa come play with us? And it like breaks my heart to be like, they just don't give a shit. Because that's how it feels. You know, they don't show up for birthday parties. We invite them to everything. They never are there. And so, yeah, when I see in real life or in TV, like functional families with like supportive, you know, parents and grandparents, I'm like, why couldn't we have had that on either side? Like, even if it wasn't my family, why couldn't Tristan's family have done? Like, why did neither of us get that?
Yeah.
But it does, like you were saying earlier, it really does make us want to do better for our children, because while we don't have that, we could start that, right? We could create that family, and maybe we are the grandparents of that family in the future, and we can have that. It just starts with us, which is a lot of pressure. But I think that's what kind of keeps us going, because, yeah, we don't have that. And I'm super resentful to people, especially like we have some really close friends who have 3 kids, and they all live really close to the grandparents on both sides. They all spend time together. They go camping. Like, both sides of the family spend time together. And I'm like, yeah. And they complain about it. And I'm like, don't. It's so hard. They live so close. They're always showing up and like helping with dinner. And I'm like, you poor thing.
Oh, no.
I hate you.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah. Like, I'm like, and I get it. I get that, like, with every situation, there are pros and cons. Like, yeah, I wouldn't want my family all up in my shit either. But, like, maybe sense the tone, read the room, like, know your audience. Like, that's not, like, don't complain about having family support to people who have 0. Like, that's maybe not the right audience for that.
Yeah. I mean, in my work, I do help, you know, folks that have financial businesses, kind of like with ownership transfers. Yeah. And then when I'm off the phone, I just talk with my coworkers. I'm like, we're helping people get more rich, and we are, you know,
I can't buy groceries.
It's like I can buy groceries, but it's like I can't do much fun things.
Right. Yeah.
Immediately, I have to like save up for months and months.
Right. Right.
So, when you're a mother of 2 boys, and then you, again, in leading up in our conversations, you said that, is it both, or is it just one that is neurodivergent?
Just one, just my oldest.
Just your oldest?
Yes.
What was it like when you kind of went through the diagnosis and then kind of figuring out how to best provide for him?
That's the hard part, is I feel like we still haven't figured it out. We started noticing at about 18 months that he was different. And obviously, I'm a teacher. I've gone through training. I know how to, you know, see the warning signs. I know all about neurodiversity and, you know, typical milestone reaching and, you know, all that stuff. But at about 18 months, we started noticing he was a little bit different. Okay. Things like he used to line up his toys, his Hot Wheels. He went through like a Hot Wheels phase. And that's another thing. He like hyper fixates on something. And so like when that's his phase, that is his phase. And anything you talk about is going to be related to that. And so Hot Wheels was the thing for a while there. And he would line them up in like rows. And if one of them was like the slightest hair out of line, he would lose his shit for hours. There was no redirecting him. Like his day and our day was over. Like there was we had no way to regulate him or calm him down. Like most kids, you can be like, shiny thing over here, distraction, but like not with him. Like he took that was the hill he was dying on that day, and that there was no coming back from that. And so we started noticing stuff like that we're like, this is not typical. We should maybe look into this. And so the first thing they did is started screening for like autism. And we get him screened every year. We'd go through the screening process, but he doesn't quite fit into that box. So he hasn't been diagnosed. Yeah. As he's getting older, we're seeing other things. Like he has a lot of sensory processing issues. Okay. So we had him screened for that. Doesn't quite fit into that box. We've had him screened for ADHD. Doesn't quite fit into that box. And so he has all these things that are like overlapping with a lot of different things, but he doesn't quite fit any one category. Okay. And so we're still really unsure like how best to support him and what, I mean, you know, we found tips and tricks over the years that work, but like we still don't really know what we're dealing with because there's so much overlapping. He also has really extreme, like crippling anxiety and depression. He actually struggles with suicidal thoughts, and that started when he was about 5, which is like really young and really scary to hear your 5-year-old talking like that. And so we just have like all of these things that we're like battling against with him on a daily basis. And I feel like we have no direction or support. And I spend so much time researching and advocating for him, and it just like never feels like enough. Like it just always feels like we're failing in some way, or there's something we should be doing differently or better. And it's just really hard not to spiral on myself, if that makes sense.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And so how do you take care of yourself kind of in this early phase? Again, you're having to deal with a non-supportive family system, and then you just gave birth, and now you have to kind of, you know, have this diagnosis and kind of also figure out how did you take care of you?
I didn't. I don't know what those words mean. You know, I try and find moments, and it's easier as the kids have gotten older. When they were younger, it was obviously more challenging because they were a lot more mommy dependent. But now that they're older, it's a little easier. You know, I've been able to, like, I take spin classes, and I find ways to, like, get out of the house. Yeah. I'm back in my career, which helps, you know. Like, I'm not just, like, in motherhood all the time. I mean, I'm still in motherhood all the time. But, you know, I get a little bit of a mental break to be a teacher, which is also kind of like motherhood. But, you know, so I try and find those things. I have people I talk to. I used to have a counselor, but unfortunately our healthcare system is so ass backwards right now that like my oldest, he used to see a counselor and a skills trainer, but then our insurance changed and this last January. And so I started making calls in January. We've been on 10 different wait lists for almost 10 months now because it's almost October. Jeez. And we just last week got him in with a counselor again. Oh, wow. So he went without services for almost 10 months because we couldn't get him in. We were calling, like I was calling weekly to these places too. Like I am that parent. Like I advocate.
Persistence.
Yes. Oh, for sure. Like, and I know the system, you know, as a teacher, like I know you have to advocate. Like I know you have to be that parent. You have to be the squeaky wheel. Yeah. The school was calling on our behalf. His primary care was calling on our behalf. We were having to go the like backwards way where like anytime he had like suicidal thoughts, we had to call like the crisis line because they have to document it. And with enough documentation, he can jump a wait list. Like we were doing all the loops and, you know, hoop jumping that we had to do. And it still took almost 10 months. So,
Tristan's work, did it provide good insurance or?
So he has insurance through his work. The boys are on mine because typically teacher insurance is pretty awesome. Oh. But at my company, it is not. So, we might be switching over to his. But we have out-of-pocket copays for everything. And so, like, every time any one of us goes to a counselor, it costs $50, and that adds up really quickly.
It does.
When my oldest has to go weekly, and then there's, 4 people in our family. Like, it's just not really feasible. No. So I'm not seeing anyone anymore, and neither is Tristan, because we're prioritizing our oldest to be able to get the services he needs. So.
I mean, I went from seeing my therapist like, every 2 weeks to like kind of dipping into every 3 weeks. Yeah. And then it's always like, as soon as the session ends, then I'm just like, something happens. I'm just like, fuck.
Yeah, the timing is never great,
I gotta wait 2 weeks. Why not wait 3 weeks?
Yes.
Damn, dude.
Yeah, it's hard. So like neither of us are doing counseling, but like I said, I was for a while, and that was helping because I was, I used my counselor to talk about like, how can I support my kid?
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's one way that I was supporting myself, but unfortunately now we had to make that sacrifice for him. So,
So when you talk to me about when you decided you wanted to become a teacher and kind of that process, because, my partner is a teacher also. I was going to tell you that.
Oh, okay.
She's a teacher also, going through the substituting route for now.
Yep.
So for you, what was kind of your like, let's do this?
I'm like that cliche person. I always knew I wanted to be a teacher. There was never, like, I was the person who set up my siblings and my stuffed animals and taught class when I was like 6 years old. So like that was just always who I was. But I think there's also an aspect to when I was growing up, we moved every year. I was never in the same school for more than a school. Like I never started and finished a school year at the same school. Like we moved constantly. Yeah. And school was the only place that I really, as an individual, felt like I had control. And I did well there. I, was able to get straight A's, and like that felt like a safe place for me. Mm-hmm. And so I think on some level, like I always wanted to be that for students. And so that also drove me to wanting to be a teacher growing up. And so everything I've ever done, aside from my brief stint at Hallmark, which is very, if you know me, very on brand to who I am.
The store, only job. Right? Yes. Okay, because, there's the Hallmark channel.
I mean, that's the dream, but no, I'm just kidding. But no, like every job I've ever had has been teaching or childcare or preschool or anything. So like my entire resume is like, if I had everything on there, it's like 5 pages of like educational experience. Mm-hmm. So I always knew that, and I was always working towards that.
Okay. Yeah. So you had this very interesting blog series or Instagram post stories series called My Stories, and it looks like I took some notes. I copied some things down. So on August 23rd of 2021, yes, I went that far back. You did mention that you would sort your stuffed animals as if you were in a class. But then you also said, as I fell in love with everything about school, and I knew I was going to be a teacher someday. Mm-hmm. So when you got the certification, you got it all. What was the first thing you did to celebrate everything?
Well, it was right before we got married, actually.
Oh,
so
great timing.
And that was kind of, we had waited. We said we didn't want to get married until after, I graduated with my master's and my teaching license. Yep. Because things were just really chaotic. I was teaching full time and in school full time, and it was a lot. Mm-hmm. And so we didn't really get to celebrate, honestly, because that was the year that there was this huge teacher shortage and all the teachers got laid off. Okay. I don't know if you remember that. It was back in 2012.
I kind of vaguely do.
Yeah. So all the teachers, they laid off like 350 or 650. I can't remember. It was so long ago.
In the triple digits.
Oh, yeah. Like lots of teachers lost their jobs. There was no hiring happening in Oregon. I was like, great time to graduate as a teacher. Like that was wonderful. So we ended up, I got a job in Arizona. And I got offered the job on a Friday, and we had to pack up and be there by Monday. And it was literally like the week after we got married.
Wow.
So we got married, and then it was like, you got a job. We made the decision. We packed up and moved to Arizona, and that was my first year teaching. And it was a wild experience. Arizona is just so different. Like you don't need a master's degree or a license to teach. Well, I mean, you need a license.
Yeah.
But you don't need a master's degree or any degree towards education. So like the other kindergarten teacher who I like shared a wall with, she was like an interior design major that just decided she wanted to be a teacher. So she went and took the test and got her license, and she'd been teaching for a while. Like, I'm not trying to discredit her. Like, she was great, but like, that's not what her training was. And so you don't even need like a bachelor's to be a teacher in Arizona. You just need an associate's and to be able to pass the test for the grade level that you're teaching. At the time, I don't know if the rules are still the same. But so that was weird to me. So I went into this, my first job. I'm like the most qualified person there on paper, right? Like I have a master's degree and everything. And it was weird because they put me in charge of literacy training, like in my first year teaching. And I was teaching all these teachers who had been there a lot longer how to teach effective literacy practices in their classrooms. So that was really bizarre. But also it was a very different, I don't know how deep you want to get, but
as deep as you want to go.
My first day teaching, I got into the parking lot and there was a school shooting. And so I was going real deep.
Okay.
It was just wildly different. Like, I was not prepared for that. But, I was in the parking lot of the school. There was a shooting, and 2 students died. And I was like, oh, cool. I'm glad we just packed up our entire lives and uprooted everything to move here. Like, this is traumatic.
Yeah.
I I had a lot of, like, I had to call DHS multiple times in my first year. I had a kid who came in with a handprint on her face from her stepdad. And it was my first realization that, like, DHS doesn't do shit. Like, they really don't. It takes so much for them to do anything. Like, I called and, you know, the dad lived, because he didn't legally live in the house. They said they couldn't do anything about it. The
DHS
stepdad
stands for?
Department of Human Services.
Okay.
It's like Child Protective Services. Like, that's the route you go.
Yeah.
But even though it was the dad, the kid said it was, you know, he has a history of, like, jail time and stuff for all kinds of things. Because he didn't legally live in the house, they couldn't do anything about it, even though he was dating the mom and was there regularly and dropped her off at school and picked her up every day. And it was just, I don't know, it was just not what I expected my first year of teaching to be like.
Yeah.
But I'm glad I did it. I feel like it, like, shaped me as an educator. And I don't know. It was different. But we didn't really get to celebrate because it was just, literally, we got married and then a week later we uprooted and moved. And it was like, oh, okay, we're doing this now. We're going.
I mean, so I hear her stories, you know, as a substitute, and some of them have been good, but then more recently she's had like 1 or 2 schools that she was there and it wasn't the most ideal situation. A lot of, like, you know, I've learned that sometimes geography does play a role 100%. In the kind of school you're going to be stepping into.
Yes.
So it's one of those, like, it's sad that, you know, that is the kind of the product of what's, you know, your geography and something going on at home. So it's like,
yeah.
I mean, as a student that grew up in Portland, Beaverton, Oregon, never had any of these things happen. So I just, every time I hear from her, I'm just like, I was such a nice kid back then.
I know.
I am so happy that my school did not have any of those things, because I'm pretty sure, I mean, I don't know how I would be.
Yeah.
But then again, as you as a teacher, seeing all these things.
Yeah.
And, you know, when you hear about, you know, first time you heard about the shooting, or, you know, obviously you don't know where you were, but
I was in the parking lot behind my car.
That's right. That's right.
I was right there, front and center. Yeah, it was.
Did you ever have that moment of, like, well, this is not the district for me?
100%. Yeah. But I was committed, and I knew that there was no way I could come back here because there were no jobs here. It was during all that huge, you know, there was no hiring for teachers. And so I was like, I don't really have a choice but to, like, stick out the year. And so we did. We stuck out 1 year and then immediately bailed. Like, we were like, there's a 0 chance we're staying here. So, yeah, it was rough. But I will say, like, you know, I've taught in Beaverton School District for, well, let's see, I taught there for 5 years before I had my oldest. And I had, you know, problems there too in different schools. I taught in 2 different schools in that 5 years. And one of them, honestly, one of the reasons I'm afraid to go back now that my kids are in school, because I'm like, I could go back now that both my kids are in school full time. Yeah. Is when I was pregnant with my oldest after, so, you know, we haven't talked about it yet, but, like, infertility, we had several miscarriages. Yeah. Like, it was a really rough process. Yeah. And finally we're pregnant, and I was telling my class, because at some point I had to tell them, because I was also very sick through my pregnancy, so I was literally teaching and puking into a bucket all day long.
Multitasking.
Oh yeah, it's just really great. Like, I had to, like, literally train my class, because every time there's vomit or anything like that, you have to call the janitor, and there's like certain processes to clean it up and stuff. So I had to train my class that if I throw up, whoever's, like, the leader of the day had to go and call the janitor so he can come down. Like, we were besties.
Nice.
So it was just a whole thing. But I had a kid in my class that year that was, like, really aggressive, would throw things, break things. We had to evacuate the room a few times. You know, like, he had to be restrained. Like, lots of things had to happen. And when I told him I was pregnant, he punched me in the stomach. And ran out of the classroom. And the problem was, obviously, that I got punched in the stomach, but admin didn't do anything to support me. He literally went to the office, and this is what happened every time you sent a behavior kid to the office. He got to get a coloring book. he got a lollipop and he came prancing back to class. I'm like, I'd punch people too. Like, I can get out of class and go get a lollipop and a coloring book. Like, who do I need to punch to get that? Right? Like, there was no consequence, no nothing. Sure. And they sent him back in the classroom like 15 minutes later. And I was like, I don't want this kid in here right now. And they're like, well, he has to be in here. I was like, I don't feel safe with him in here. And I was the one who got in trouble for saying I didn't want that student in my class for the rest of the day. There was no support for me as the teacher. And there was no consequence for the student either. And I feel like that's what we're seeing a lot in schools right now, is that there's so many behavior things. And it's like, I don't want to fully put it on admin. Like, yes, they are responsible for it, but like schools are so understaffed. And that's really the problem, is that like no one has time for that shit. And it's not fair. Like, that really should be a priority. Like, safety of the people in your school should be a priority. But the reality is that like there's no one in schools that's trained and certified and qualified to do these things. That should be your school counselor. But most schools don't have one. Or if they do, it's like, you know, not even part-time, because they're bouncing between 3 different schools. And so there's not a designated person there to help with those situations as they arise. Yeah. And so that we're seeing even more now. Like, this was, you know, my oldest is 8. Like, this was 8 years ago. Yeah. And we're seeing it even more now. There's a lot more behavior issues, a lot less support in schools, a lot less funding. There's a huge teacher shortage right now on top of it. And so that support is just not there. And so that makes me like terrified to go back in person. And I'm like, I don't know if I mean, right now I don't want to, but like, I don't know about the future, but right now that's a hard pass.
Kind of going off that series of my stories, back in a couple days later from that first post, August 25th, you said that you became a stay-at-home mom. And then you did add more, but I want to kind of jump from that first part of that caption to you becoming a virtual teacher on August 25th of that same year. Now, obviously, it did make sense at that point to, you know, be a virtual teacher because of COVID. Still, like, it's a year old. But now COVID's now 3 years old. Schools are back open. The situations, from what you just said, it does make sense to stay as a virtual. But has the thought of creeped in at all of like, going back and?
Yeah. So when I became a mom, after the first like year and a half, I was like, okay, this is great, but I'm bored. Like, every day is like Groundhog's Day. It's the same over and over. Yeah. And like, don't get me wrong, I didn't want to like leave my kid and like go back and teaching and put him in daycare. Like, obviously, I would have done that. But like, that wasn't what I wanted. But I needed something to kind of tap into another side of my brain that wasn't just like mom 24/7. Sure. And so I actually developed a play-based curriculum. And I started sharing that on social media. I was doing it with my kid. And I was just sharing that. And that's how my following like really grew, was people were liking these activities and then they were engaging with them and stuff like that. And so I'd been developing that for a few years. I had a second kid, you know, we went through it with him too. And then the pandemic happened and so many parents were like, what the hell are we going to do? And I had so many people reaching out to me like, what are we going to do? Do you have this curriculum available? Like, you know, what are we going to do? And so I decided to open my own school during the pandemic. And it was called Tiny School. Even though the curriculum had been around longer than that, I decided to open it. And so during the pandemic, I had 84 families signed up for my school. I did live lessons. I sent them activities, curriculum, like everything was sent to them and accessible through like a Google Drive. And we did school that year. And so that was really fun. I really enjoyed that. I did like a summer school, like a literacy boot camp afterwards for kids who are still struggling with reading. But it was just taking the curriculum that I had developed for my own kids and like putting it into practice with other people's kids. And it got a really good response. And it took me several years, but I finally, just finally, like a month ago, got it put together so that people can actually purchase the curriculum. Hey. So now it's available for purchase. Nice. It's a very slow process. But it's the same curriculum I even use teaching virtually now. And the reason I stayed virtual was just because my kids were not in school full time. You know, even after the big pandemic year where everything was shut down, my kids stayed home because my youngest wasn't old enough yet to go anywhere. And my oldest, with the mask mandates and his eccentricities, like that was not going to happen. Like having to wear a mask for 6 hours a day was not going to happen. Yeah. And so I homeschooled him for kindergarten. Okay. And I, you know, homeschooled my youngest who wasn't really in school, but, you know, he did the stuff with us. And then in first grade, they still had the mask mandates at school for my oldest. And so we did a virtual program through the Beaverton School District.
Okay.
But he was still home with me. So I was like, obviously I can't go back in person. Like I have 2 kids at home still. And then last year, my oldest went in person for the first time.
Wow.
And my youngest was part-time in a preschool.
Yeah.
And even then I was like, still can't go back in person because my youngest is only at school until noon. So, I can't work, half a day. Mm-hmm. And so this is really the first year that the question really came up, like, do I go back in person or do I stay online?
Yeah.
Because both of them are in school full time. So I could go to school and teach full time if I wanted. And there's parts of me that really wants to, like, I really do miss the in-person. Like, you can do so much more in person. It's so much more interactive. I miss, like, the hugs and the smiles and, that stuff. I mean, I get the smiles online, but it's not the same, you know? Like, I miss that stuff. I miss being able to, like, have other teachers that you pass in the hallway and, like, exchange a look and just know exactly what they're thinking, those kinds of things. But I also, being online allows me to be more present for my kids.
That makes sense.
I can go and volunteer in their classrooms anytime I want, and I don't have to get a sub. Online, you don't have to get a sub. It's great. I don't have to make sub plans.
Pretty good.
If I'm sick, I can work from bed, like, if I need to, or I can just take the afternoon off and, like, just let families know. So there's a lot more flexibility. Okay. And so, especially with my oldest having his quirks, there's been several times, like, there's been days where I'm, like, on the phone with the office or his teacher or his counselor or whatever, problem solving and, like, talking through stuff. It's like, I can't do that if I'm in person. Mm-hmm. And so while this job is not ideal and there's a giant, like, there's a $20,000 pay cut that goes with teaching online. For anyone who wants to know that, it's a pretty big pay cut to a career that already gets paid pennies. But that flexibility is so important for me right now so that I can do all the things that I want to do. So for now, I mean, we're taking it 1 year at a time. Sure. But for now, I think online still suits my purposes as, a mom and teacher. So
yeah, so that was actually one of my follow-up questions of, like, so again, she's my partner's doing subbing, but she is missing that, like, consistency of seeing the same people, having those conversations, being a coworker with someone versus, like, a temporary coworker. You just answered it, so you're good. You're good. And then I was kind of wondering about, like, class load, because it seems, I would think that since the schools opened up last year, or I think it was like tail end 21 or something like that. Do you still have, like, a full class, or has it been shrinking kind of periodically?
No, it's still really big. So last year I actually had 73 kids in my first grade class. When I signed in on the first day of class, I had 93, and I was like, absolutely not. And so a couple kids were on the list but had actually switched schools, and they just hadn't notified us yet. So that, like, dropped a few off. Okay. And then they actually took 10 of my kids and gave them to another teacher because she had really low numbers in kindergarten. So they gave her a couple. But for most of the year, I was sitting around, like, 70, which is a lot of first graders.
That's a lot.
This year I have 47, which is still a lot, but not in the 70s. So it's better. Yeah. But even, like, just last week, I got 9 more. So, I mean, it's just... Wow. I think that in general, we're seeing a really big shift to online schooling for a lot of reasons. I mean, one of which is the flexibility. It's flexible for families too. If they want to go out of town, they just take a laptop and they can do school on the go, right? Mm-hmm. Like, so there's that flexibility. COVID is still a concern for some families, especially with, like, this year, there's talk of it, like, spiking up again. And so, like, some families are here for that reason. We have a lot of families who are in, like, really rural areas, and, like, the schools aren't great. So they choose, our program because it's virtual. There's, school shootings is a huge thing. So many families I talk to are like, I don't feel safe with my kid at school. Makes sense. So we're seeing a big push to online as well. So, like, most of our elementary classes are sitting well over 50 students. Wow. And we only have one teacher. Well, not even one per grade level this year. So we're really doing great. We're doing just great.
Such optimism.
Yeah. So, I think we're seeing a lot of push to online for a lot of different reasons.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And so when I was just checking your Instagram out, I did see that you're selling your curriculums on Stan Store. Mm-hmm. Just to see it there, the stuff that you worked hard to create, the stuff that the curriculum that you wanted to find different inspirations from to make it best for your kids, and seeing it online, and then people actually, like, buying it. What was that feeling like?
It's weird. I mean, honestly, the whole social media thing is weird for me because I when I started it, it was just a way to share things that bring me joy. Mm-hmm. And that's still how I treat it, right? It's still just things that bring me joy. I don't post regularly. Like, you know, some people post like 2 times a day, 1 time a day. Like, I don't even do that. I don't stress over like how many followers I have or what I'm posting. I post it if I want to post it. Yeah. And it's still weird that people are interested in that. You know, it's like, it's just like me. This is like a random person. And like people are actually like interested in what I'm sharing and what I have to say and what I've created and like trusted me with their children. They literally paid me to teach their kids for a year. Like, it's like wild. Like, I'm going to be honest, like imposter syndrome really sneaks in like all the time where I'm just like, why me? Like, why do people trust me? Yeah. It's really bizarre and also validating at the same time. It's like all these things that I've worked for are actually coming true and people like see my value and like trust that I know what I'm doing. And like, I don't know, there's like a lot of feelings that go with it. I can't even describe it.
What are some tactics that you've developed to help fight this imposter syndrome? Because it does seem like, you know, with kind of take it from the beginning, it's like, you know, you're with Tristan for 17 years. And then I can imagine I guess just looking at it from my perspective, it's like, okay, do you think there's some version of like, oh, I don't know if does he really enjoy me? And then, you know, the marriage and also the invisible family support that's not really there.
Right.
Like, how have you kind of, there's different versions I've kind of picked up on of imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
How have you kind of helped fight that?
I don't know. I mean, I think hearing, like being able to talk about things is really helpful for me. Like I'm definitely a talker. So that helps, like having people that I can talk to. But I think hearing the positive feedback is really validating too. It's like, okay, like no one paid that person to say that nice thing about me, right? Yeah. Like they must genuinely feel that. Yeah. And so hearing that validation coming from different places really helps me to be like, okay, like I do know what I'm talking about. Yeah. I'm seeing that validation at like work too, you know, families that I had last year who have a new teacher this year and they're just like, we had a field trip yesterday. It was our first one this year.
Wow.
And they were just like, I heard several, like overheard a few and was a part of a few conversations where they were just talking about like how amazing I am as a teacher. And I was like, well, this is nice, you know? And so like hearing it from other people, you know, is really helpful to be like, okay, like this is just who I am. And like, it's not like some like fake thing. I'm not paying these people to say it. Like this is where I was meant to be. And it's validating to hear it coming from other people.
How is the best way for Tristan to support you as, how has his best forms of support been? There you go. That's my question.
That's the words.
That's the words. Has you kind of take this unconventional path into teaching?
Yeah, I mean, he's always just been really supportive of like whatever makes me happy. Even with the $20,000 pay cut, which is a huge deal. It's like, you know, this is what's best for our family, and he's always supported me in that. He's always there to like talk and, you know, bitch too if I need to, because, you know, life is really like, our life is very stressful. Yeah. You know, teaching is really stressful. Parenting is really stressful. Having a neurodivergent kid is very stressful, you know? So like we deal with a lot of stressors. And I mean, the cliche of it is like, he really is my best friend. Like I can talk to him about anything. There's never any judgment, and he's always there to listen. He's also, over the years, something that we've been working on is helping pick up some of the mental load and like the stuff around the house. Cause like before I did everything. Yeah. I cleaned, I cooked, I did all the errands. I made sure all the things were purchased, all the appointment making, like all the things. And so he's been trying to find ways to kind of step up and take some of that off of me because it's a lot. I mean, like, I don't know if you can relate. You don't have children yet, and you're not the, you know, default parent, but it's a lot. Like having to remember, like, you know, even when they were little, like who's teething? Do we have enough medication? When was the last time they had their flu shot? You know, like all those things that like pile up that you're just like taking up brain space. Trying to take some of that off my plate, so that I have a little more space to like breathe. Because it's a lot. So that's like the ways that he supports me, is trying to find ways to help, and then just being there as a sounding board anytime I need him.
Randomly thought about this, but when you were talking about your eldest having the Hot Wheels obsession, I mean, Tristan could have just sat down with him and started watching Fast and the Furious.
Oh my gosh. I don't know about that. My oldest is very sensitive and like does not handle
loud.
Even like shows that are like below his like. I don't know if you've heard of Bluey because you don't have children, so it probably doesn't cross your path.
I know Blue's Clues.
Okay, no, not Blue's Clues. Very similar. There's a dog family, and like it's my favorite show. I'm not gonna lie. Like I will watch it without my children. I love it.
Okay.
But it's made for like preschoolers, toddlers, and like he was terrified of that show recently at 8 years old. Terrified of that show, and we're like, I don't understand. Like he's just highly sensitive kid. So we haven't done any of the fun. Like we can't even watch superhero movies yet, which I'm like so excited to do with them. They love superheroes,
nice,
but just from like stories. But I'm like, I don't think they could watch the movies yet. Like he would have nightmares for months. Like we just can't yet.
Yeah, pick and choose.
Yes, exactly. So
you can't watch all of the Marvel universe. You gotta just some of the bright and fun, colorful ones.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. We'll see.
So what was Tristan's response when you started making some social media videos with your son or sons?
Yeah.
And because from what some of the videos I've seen, it's like you're kind of like mouthing the words to like a song or like to a quote. So they're like, I wasn't watch all of them, so I'm sorry about that. But what was it like to just try to get your son to kind of like match the wordings to what they're saying? Because like that just seems like a lot of like coordination there. And then what was Tristan's response when he saw it?
Tristan's fine with it. He trusts my judgment. Yeah. Like I said, I don't share personal information about my kids on there. I've gone back and forth on even if I want to share their faces. But obviously I share their faces, so that's where we're at with that.
Yeah.
But he's totally fine with it. Getting the kids to cooperate is interesting. Mm-hmm. A lot of it is just like creative editing. So like I'll have him say, if there's like a phrase that I want the kid to say, I'll just have him say it and then I'll just cut it so it kind of looks like it's where it's supposed to be. But I don't do that part very often. Like I don't have them like say the words very often because it would just be a nightmare.
Yeah.
And I'm not like I am not that good at social media. I'm going to be honest with you. And so trying to edit videos and like do these things is like really tough for me. And so I'm like, I don't want the extra work.
Kind of go back to the whole validation. I mean, we also talked about this before we started about getting recognized in public. Because you're in the 4 figures when it comes to social media following. So, well, what were you doing? And then what was your thought after, you kind of parted from the person you were talking with about?
It's happened multiple times.
Yeah.
And it's really unsettling every time because it's like this person that you don't know, because I don't follow this person back. I don't see their videos. So there's this person that knows me that I've never met before in my entire life. And they're like, hey, Tasha. And I'm like, I don't know you.
Yeah.
And then you have that moment of panic, like, am I supposed to know you? Like, did we go to high school together? Do we work together? You're like running through. Like, am I supposed to know this person? And they're like, oh, I follow you on social media. And I'm like, oh, okay, God, I don't need to know you.
But
then it's like, I don't know how to talk to you either because like, I'm like, cool. Like, I don't know what to say. Like, good for you.
Yeah.
I'm sorry that you follow me. Like, what do I say? It happened once at Target. Somebody was at Target and like ran into me and was talking to me, and it was just like really weird afterwards because it's just surreal. Like it just doesn't feel like, did that just really happen?
Right.
And then once we were at a basketball class for my youngest, and like someone was like staring at me. I'm like getting my kids close. I'm like, there's this weirdo staring at me. Like I'm gonna pull my kids closer. And then she's like, you're Tasha, right? And I'm like, yes. And then she like tells me like, oh, I've been following you for years. And I'm like, this is so bizarre. So it's just like, it's this really weird, like, I don't know how to talk to people. Like it reminds me, I always make this joke with my husband from How I Met Your Mother, where they're like, I can't remember what they're doing. They're like spying on someone, and Marshall's like, what do I do with my hands? What do I usually do with my hands? I feel like that all the time. I'm like, how do I make words? How do I speak? What do I do with my hands? Because it's just so unsettling when someone knows you and your life so well and you know nothing about this person, not even their name or face. And so it's just weird.
I mean, if there are people that haven't seen that show, that did happen in a movie with Talladega Nights. With Will Ferrell going like, he's in an interview early on in the movie. He's like, I don't know what to do with my hands.
What do I usually do with these?
I drove so fast. Put your hands down.
You just get like this weird, like, I don't know how to interact. Like, I forgot how to talk to people kind of moment where you're just like freeze for a second. And it never, like, it's happened multiple times and it's never gotten easier. Like, it's still very, very weird every time.
Yeah.
And I think it's like also because, like I said, like I I very much use my social media platform to share things that I enjoy.
Sure. Yeah.
But I also share very real life stuff. Like my stories are always very real, very raw, very vulnerable. I don't sugarcoat. Like there's a lot of people out there, some people who I love to follow too, who just post the positives of like parenting or teaching. And I'm like, that's not reality. And it's really isolating because people watch that and they're like, well, my life doesn't look anything like that, right? Mm-hmm. Like, what is she doing that I'm not? And so I share all the messy. We've talked about infertility on there. We've talked about school shootings. We've talked about my oldest and his struggles. How much motherhood fucking sucks sometimes. Like, I'm very raw and vulnerable on there. And so people really do know a lot about, like, me and, like, my personal life and my mental state and how I'm doing. Mm-hmm. And so that's really weird, too, because I'm like, I know nothing about this other person who's coming to me and they know all the struggles I had in the past week. And so, like, it's weird.
Yeah, I could see that. And, I kind of, we kind of talked about bits and pieces of your My Story Instagram stories, but the middle part of that sandwich, here you wrote, we spent 2 years, countless painful procedures, thousands of dollars, and a whole lot of heartache to conceive. You lost 3 babies along the way, and were actually told that you were going to lose a 4th. But, you felt ashamed, alone, defeated. But then finally, 2015, that's when your eldest came into the world. Yep. So I'm one of those, I'm learning to double check my captions and make sure that everything looks pristine. Okay, I didn't put the extra O under 2.
right.
So now it's just whatever. When you wrote that one in particular, how many times did you have to just read it over and kind of make sure that, okay, I feel okay with this going out to the world?
Probably once. I am very much, like I said, I use my social media to be very authentic. And so I wrote it out once and then I did a quick read through to be like, did that sentence make sense? Did I have a weird typo? Yeah. But I don't stress too much about it because, again, I want it to be authentic. I'm a real person. I'm not some like robot out there like making captions, posting things, right? Like if I make a typo, get over it. I'm a human. It happens, right? And so, yeah, I usually write things one time and then I do like a quick like reread, edit kind of thing and then just post it out there.
Yeah.
So I try not to overthink.
There are times where I'm just like, I have to like hyperventilate. I'm like, okay, all right, I'm good. I got this.
Yeah.
And go, oh, Jesus.
Yeah. Deep breaths.
And then like, if it's sports related, like 10 minutes later, my brother will be like, hey, you misspelled this. I'm like, God dang
it. Yep.
Great. Just be happy.
But you're a person and it's okay to make those mistakes.
Yeah. Just be happy your sisters aren't going to hound you and be like, hey, you
they are not.
You did this wrong. Like, yep. Okay, I'm sorry.
Yep.
I mean, again, for this being our first talk together and also being kind of a blueprint to it all. I mean, this was fantastic. I had a lot of fun with this one just because you are very talkative. Now, I did kind of wonder too, has there been moments in the 2020 and 2021 year that you're just like, I am kind of, you have an awkward interaction and then you're just kind of like, I don't know what to do from here. Because, you kind of had those, isolations and you didn't talk to other people. Because I know, for example, it's like, okay, I was on vacation for like an extra, for 3 days. I forgot how to type words. I forgot how to answer the phone. So it would take me like a little bit to kind of get back to the groove of it. But your outer personal skills, how were they affected during those 2 years?
I don't really feel like they were because I was still very active on my social media and I was teaching at the time too. So like I wasn't.
Conversation with kids is different than conversation with adults, though.
But not when you're teaching younger grades. I spend more time talking to the parents than I do to the children. Oh, I teach, obviously, to the children, but most of my interactions are with parents. And so while there is like a difference, and I definitely have like a teacher persona that I put on, take out the swear words mostly. That's mostly the persona I put on. But I didn't really feel that isolation as much because I was still so present in social media and interacting with people on there, and then also having been teaching throughout that whole process. I was still talking to families and students and doing all the things. So I don't really feel like I took a hit in that. Well, other people who talk to me might feel like I did, but I don't feel like I did.
Well, I'm glad to know that the bubbliness kept.
Yes.
It never got to a dullness. But, And now, I mean, before this interview, you were working out, and now you get to go back into the world and
go back into the world, deal with some children some more.
Deal with some more children, but again,
just children all the time.
From a distance.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
So, Tasha, I like to wrap up my interviews by asking a couple questions from this packet of 250 would you rather questions.
Boy. Okay.
So something fun to kind of, close up this very interesting conversation. And actually, again, with you being a teacher, my partner being a teacher, it's one of those, like, I do have an additional investment. I have a level of investment with every person I talk with, but this one's like, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. A teacher's perspective.
That's right.
I like it. Okay. So how are you with watermelon? Do you like watermelon?
I like real watermelon. I do not like flavored, like things that are watermelon flavored.
Would you rather never eat watermelon ever again or be forced to eat watermelon with every meal?
I think I'd like to eat it with every meal. That doesn't seem like I would just love that. That sounds great. It's not a punishment or anything.
Yeah, so I love Emmerson watermelon, and my partner, she's not a big watermelon person. So this summer I've eaten a lot of watermelon. Yeah. So I also realized, like, oh, right, watermelon makes you bloated.
Yeah. Totally a lot of water in there. Just
yeah. It's been wonderful. There was one, but you don't drink alcohol, so I am going to say not this time. Have you ever had a celebrity crush?
Yeah.
Okay.
Many.
Would you rather smooch Chris Pratt, Chris Pine, Chris Evans, or Chris Hemsworth? Which of the Chris's? Tristan, it's hypothetical. Hypothetical, would you rather?
I think I'd have to go with Pratt.
Pratt?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know, like...
I like the goofiness. Like, I don't know.
You didn't think he lost his goofy when he jumped to Jurassic Park and the superhero movies?
No, I still think he was plenty goofy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I still think he was plenty goofy.
We started watching the Chris Hemsworth, Limitless on. It's on Disney Plus, and it's like National Geographic. Basically, he's doing things to kind of like push himself.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
And I'm just like, damn it, the dude's buff, blue eyes, accent. If I was in that situation, probably Hemsworth.
Yeah, right. I mean, they're all very pretty. Like we can't deny that. But I don't know. I always go for like the goofy pretty. Like I don't know. It's just my thing. That's my thing. Yeah.
Tasha, where can the people find you on social media?
Confessions of a Tiny Teacher.
There's a underscore under?
It is an underscore, but if you just search it, it pops up too. So
there you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
You don't have to worry about that.
Now, if this is not your first podcast episode, interview, I'm okay with that. I won't be hurt, but you got this one under the books or under your belt. How are you feeling?
Good. I've actually done a couple before.
I figured you have. I remember David mentioning that.
Yeah.
I was trying to find like clips of,
Yeah, they were a while ago. I did one about my infertility journey. So like specifically about that. And then I did one about motherhood. And then I also did one about like my play-based curriculum and just like my philosophy as a teacher. Okay. So done a couple.
This is what would it be? The
fourth?
This is the fourth?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Still not hurt. Still not hurt. Well, I mean, this one also kind of we talked about all those.
Yeah, this is
too.
Yeah.
So this is like the whole enchilada.
Yeah, the other ones were very like specific topics. So this one was very open.
And in fact, also you didn't cry.
I didn't cry. It was just really impressive, I think.
All right.
Yeah.
Go Keoni Chats.
There you go. Yeah.
Thank you so much. This has been fantastic.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much to the guest for joining me and sharing a part of their story. And a special thank you to you for listening or watching this episode and taking the guest's story. And there are a lot of podcasts out there, and a lot of them do talk about the same things I talk about. So for you to dedicate your day or night to just learning more about my guest, that means the world to me. So thank you so much. And just a reminder that all episodes are available on all podcast platforms and now back on YouTube. And you can subscribe and follow for announcements for when those episodes are released. I do also make the announcements on social media, so you can follow the show by looking up at KCmedia13 on Instagram and Twitter, then at Conluke Media on Facebook. If you're interested in becoming a guest, you can email me your story, and you can email me at kcmedia13@yahoo.com, And I would love to read about you and learn more about you and get an interview scheduled and just get you a podcast episode. So everyone, until the next episode, please take care.